The invitation came on a Tuesday. It was in a cream-colored envelope with gold lettering. My hands shook as I opened it and read the words that would bring me back to a family I hadn't seen in 7 years. You are cordially invited to celebrate the wedding of Emma Catherine Anderson. My sister's wedding. Of course, it would be grand and perfect, everything she had always dreamed of. Emma had always been the favorite, the golden child, while I was the disappointment, the one who chose to live life differently. My name is Olivia Anderson. I'm 32 years old, and this was my first time returning home since my parents disowned me for not following the plans they had so carefully made for my life. The last time I saw them, my father called me ungrateful. My mother cried about the shame I brought to the family, and Emma stood by, silent as they kicked me out. Now here I was, standing in front of the mansion I grew up in, a house that had always felt more like a prison than a home. The gardens were still perfect, with roses blooming in neat rows, just how my mother liked everything, controlled and flawless. Olivia. My mother's voice broke through the air as she opened the door. There was no hug, no warm welcome, just her usual critical look. You're late. I glanced at my watch. I was actually 5 minutes early, but there was no use arguing. Some things never change. Hello, Mother, I said with a forced smile. It's been a long time. She stepped aside, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Well, that was your choice, wasn't it? But Emma insisted you be here for her wedding. I must say, your appearance isn't exactly what we were expecting. I looked down at my expensive designer suit, one that cost more than most people's monthly salary. But of course, it wasn't the conservative dress she would have preferred. She didn't wait for me to respond and continued, leading me into the kitchen, where caterers rushed around. You'll be helping with the arrangements, making sure everything runs smoothly, helping the staff, that sort of thing. The wedding needs to be perfect. I stared at my mother, realizing the truth. They hadn't invited me as a guest. They wanted me to help. Of course, I replied, keeping my voice calm. Whatever Emma needs. She nodded, clearly pleased. Good. At least you can be useful. Emma will be down shortly. She's been so busy with the wedding plans. Her fiancé, Thomas, comes from an excellent family. A merger between the companies is already in discussion. Of course. For my family, everything had always been about business, appearances, and climbing the social ladder. That's why they were so furious when 7 years ago, I refused to marry the son of one of my father's business partners. Instead, I walked away, leaving behind their money, connections, and suffocating expectations. What they didn't know was how much that decision had changed my life. They had no idea the small tech startup I joined back then had grown into one of the most successful companies in the country. They didn't know I now owned 3 tech firms or that my net worth was more than triple what my father's company was worth. I kept my success quiet, even changing my last name professionally to avoid the connection. To them, I was still the rebellious daughter who had thrown her future away. Emma appeared at the top of the grand staircase, descending like a princess, just as she always had. At 28, she looked exactly like the perfect society bride our mother had dreamed of, flawless hair, makeup, and smile. Livy, she exclaimed, hugging me with practiced warmth. I'm so glad he came. Everything has to be perfect for the wedding. Congratulations, I said, hugging her back. Thomas must be special. Her smile flickered for a brief moment. Ogie's perfect. Daddy says the merger will secure the company's future, and his family is so well connected. Some things never changed. I thought about warning her, telling her how it felt to live for other people's expectations. But when I looked into her eyes, I could see she had already accepted her role, just as she always had. The rehearsal dinner is tomorrow night, my mother cut in. You'll need to be here early to help set up. And please try to dress appropriately. I nodded but already knew what I would wear, not the conservative dress she wanted, but something that would remind them I wasn't the same person they had thrown out 7 years ago. As I drove back to my hotel, I thought about how different my life was now. My penthouse apartment in New York, my thriving companies, the respect I had earned on my own terms. Tomorrow, I would show them. They'd catch glimpses of it, whether they were ready or not. But the real question was I ready for them to know the truth? The rehearsal dinner was everything I expected. Over-the-top flower arrangements, sparkling crystal glasses, and tension so thick you could choke on it. I arrived early, as instructed, wearing a channel dress that cost more than my mother's entire wardrobe. Her expression when she saw me almost made the price tag worth it. That's hardly appropriate for kitchen staff, she said, her disapproving gaze scanning my outfit. I'm not kitchen staff, Mother, I replied calmly. I'm your daughter. My father entered the room then, his presence as overbearing as ever. Olivia, he said sharply, I trust you'll be discreet about your situation. We don't need questions from Thomas's family. I smiled, remembering my recent meeting with Thomas's father. He didn't know I was Emma's sister. Very few people connected Olivia Anderson with Olivia Reynolds, the CEO of Reynolds Tech. But he had certainly been eager to discuss partnerships with my companies. Don't worry, Dad, I said. I won't embarrass you. The evening unfolded like a choreographed dance. Emma played her role flawlessly, laughing at the right moments, touching Thomas's arm just so, but I noticed the cracks in her performance. Her smile would falter when she thought no one was looking. During dinner, I overheard Thomas's father chatting with mine. The merger will save Anderson Industries, he said. You're lucky Emma's so cooperative. My blood boiled. They were using her as a pawn, just as they had tried to use me. The difference was, I had escaped. Later, Emma found me in the kitchen, where I was supposed to be helping clean up. You look different, Liv, she said softly. Happier. I am, I replied. You could be too, you know. You don't have to go through with this. She twisted her engagement ring nervously. It's not that simple. The company's struggling. Dad needs this merger. And what about what you need? I asked. I need to not disappoint them like you did, she snapped, then immediately looked regretful. I'm sorry, I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I interrupted. But you're wrong about one thing. I didn't disappoint them. I disappointed their expectations. There's a difference. The next morning, Thomas's father invited me to breakfast. He still had no clue who I really was. Miss Reynolds, he began, I'd like to discuss a potential acquisition. Your tech companies would be a valuable addition to our portfolio. I sipped my coffee, savoring the irony. That's interesting, I said. I heard you're already planning a merger with Anderson Industries. He waved dismissively. That old dinosaur. We'll strip it for parts once the merger's complete. Henry Anderson doesn't know it yet, but his company won't exist in 6 months. That's why this wedding is so important. My grip tightened around my coffee cup. And Emma? Does she know this? He laughed, a cold, dismissive sound. The girl? She's just happy to be marrying into our family. Women like her are easily managed. I stood up, my decision clear. Mr. Harrison, I said firmly, I think it's time I introduce myself properly. I'm Olivia Anderson, Emma's sister, and I think we need to have a very different conversation. His face went pale as he realized who I was. I pulled out my phone and played the recording of our earlier conversation. Now, I said, let's talk about what's really going to happen. By that afternoon, news of the canceled merger was spreading like wildfire through both families. Emma found me in the garden, her face a mix of confusion and relief. What did you do? She asked. I handed her the recording. I showed you who Thomas's family really is. The rest is up to you. She listened to the recording, her hands shaking. When it ended, she silently took off her engagement ring and placed it on the table. They're going to be furious, she whispered. Probably, I replied. But sometimes anger is better than a lifetime of regret. That evening, while chaos erupted in both families, I sat in my hotel room and made a phone call. It was time to change everything. My father's company might be struggling, but it wasn't beyond saving, not with the right partner. It was time to show my family who I really was. The morning of Emma's canceled wedding was bright and clear. Instead of preparing for the ceremony, both families were in full-blown crisis mode. I walked into my father's study, where he sat with his head in his hands, looking defeated. The company's ruined, he muttered, not even looking up. Everything I built. Not necessarily, I said, placing a folder on his desk. I have a proposal. He opened the folder and stared in shock at its contents. Reynolds Tech wants to partner with us. But, how? Why would Olivia Reynolds? Because I am Olivia Reynolds, I said softly. I changed my name when I started my company. I didn't want to rely on the family fortune. I needed to prove I could do it on my own. He looked at me, really seeing me for the first time in years. You're the CEO of Reynolds Tech. I nodded. 3 companies, actually. And I'm offering to save Anderson Industries, not through a takeover, but a real partnership. We'll modernize your infrastructure, bring in new technologies, and build something stronger together. Why? he asked in a quiet voice. After everything. Because you're my family, I said simply, and because success shouldn't come at the cost of someone else's happiness. Later that day, Emma found me in the garden, where workers were taking down the wedding decorations. Is it true? She asked. About your companies? Yes, I said. And I built them by following my own path, not by living up to anyone else's expectations. She sat beside me, tears in her eyes. I've been so afraid of disappointing them that I almost ruined my life. I took Emma's hand. It's not too late to find your own way. My mother was the last to come around. She found me in the kitchen, where I was supposed to be helping with the wedding. She stood awkwardly in the doorway. Why didn't you tell us? She asked. Would you have believed me? I replied. Or would you have thought it was just another way I was defying your plans? She flinched. I was wrong, Olivia, about so many things. The partnership between Reynolds Tech and Anderson Industries was announced the following week. The business world was stunned to discover that Olivia Reynolds and Olivia Anderson were the same person, but the story only added to my reputation. Emma decided to take time to figure out what she truly wanted. She moved to New York, started therapy, and eventually found her passion for environmental law. At first, our parents struggled with the changes, but seeing both their daughters happy and successful slowly shifted their perspective. A year later, we gathered for another family event, the opening of the Anderson Reynolds Innovation Center. As I cut the ribbon, I caught my father's eye. He gave a small nod, and in that nod, I felt all the words we'd never been able to say. Later he told me, I'm proud of you, not because of your success, but because you had the courage to be yourself. My mother, standing nearby, added softly, we should have seen it sooner. That evening, I stood in my old bedroom, now a guest room, looking out at the garden where I used to dream of escaping. Emma joined me, looking more relaxed and confident than I'd ever seen her. You know what's funny, she said. They thought making you help with my wedding was a punishment, but it gave you the perfect chance to save us all. I smiled. Sometimes the best revenge is becoming the person you were meant to be. Now, at family dinners, there are no more talks of arranged marriages or business deals. Instead, we talk about dreams and possibilities, about building things that matter. My parents are learning, slowly but surely, that real success isn't about status or money. It's about the courage to live authentically. As for me, I'm right where I'm meant to be. I'm successful on my own terms, helping others find their path, and finally part of a family that sees me for who I am. Sometimes I think about that wedding invitation, about how they tried to diminish me by making me the help. They had no idea they were giving me the perfect stage to show them who I'd become. More importantly, they had no idea their attempt to humble me would help heal wounds that had festered for years. Sometimes, the best endings come from the most unexpected beginnings.